From strength to struggle, the decline of U.S. global power. There is an old saying that some observers often cite when trying to explain the repeated rise and fall of great civilizations. It offers a concise explanation for why no dominant empire has ever been able to sustain its strength indefinitely. Over time, every major civilization has experienced decline, often not because of external enemies, but due to internal decay. The phrase goes, "Hard times produce strong men. Strong men produce good times. Good times produce weak men. Weak men produce hard times." If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing, giving it a like, and sharing it with others who might find it helpful. Your support truly means a lot. When examining the present state of the United States, many analysts believe the nation is now entering the final phase of that cycle. Years of prosperity have led to widespread complacency, and individuals now rising to power may be unintentionally, though sometimes deliberately, steering the country toward hardship. Some argue that the era of undisputed American global dominance may already be drawing to a close. This significant shift, however, is not always apparent to those living within the country. Rapid developments are occurring so quickly that the average citizen may not yet notice. But individuals with broader access to international perspectives, especially those engaging with global audiences online, have begun noticing substantial changes in how the U.S. is viewed from abroad. Outside the U.S., attitudes are changing. Trust in American leadership is weakening. In some regions, it's not merely trust that is fading, there is now open skepticism and even rejection of U.S. influence. A growing number of countries appear eager to detach themselves from the U.S.-led global framework. What's emerging is a fast-developing, multipolar world, one that seeks to fill the vacuum left by America's retreat from its traditional global role. These shifts might still be reversible, but not if the country continues down its current path. Throughout history, every major empire has relied on two foundational pillars to build and maintain power: military supremacy and global trade. Any civilization that aspired to greatness typically prioritized one or both of these elements, whether through cooperation or conquest. The United States followed this model, though in a somewhat unique way. Particularly after World War II, it adopted a globalist approach, building economic ties across continents and establishing military bases worldwide. Unlike earlier empires, the U.S. often used its military strength not to dominate, but to offer protection, thereby encouraging voluntary cooperation and trade. This model allowed the country to benefit economically while projecting influence without direct control. Yet over recent decades, a shift in domestic attitudes has led to a growing discomfort with this global role. Many Americans now view international engagement as a liability rather than a strategic asset, despite the fact that it has historically been a source of immense national benefit. The shift became most visible during the presidency of Donald Trump. A number of his policies, along with the rhetoric surrounding them, signaled a retreat from America's traditional international leadership. Public comments about acquiring territories such as Greenland or asserting control over the Panama Canal and even Canada were seen by many as more than just symbolic. They reflected a potential change in how the U.S. might seek influence in the future, less through partnership, more through force. Additionally, the imposition of tariffs on major allies, including Canada, Mexico, and China, upended long-standing trade relationships. These moves undermined the economic trust that had been built over decades. On the foreign policy front, halting military support for Ukraine represented a significant break from past commitments. These decisions, taken together, signal a weakening of both pillars that historically underpinned America's power, trade, and military alliances. The use of tariffs, in particular, reflects a misunderstanding of America's long-standing economic advantage. For decades, the U.S. benefited from importing more than it exported, what economists call a trade deficit. This model allowed it to access goods from across the world at low cost, a hallmark of global empires. Now, however, the country is deliberately raising prices on imported goods, hoping to incentivize domestic production. While that may sound beneficial, many economists argue that it is historically short-sighted and ignores the strategic value of global supply chains. From a military perspective, the U.S. is also retreating from the role that made it a trusted security partner. Empires typically gain influence either by conquering or by protecting. America had largely chosen the latter, until recently. Today, that protection appears to be waning. The US is scaling back support for countries like Ukraine while expressing frustration with the costs of international engagement. This sends a message that the country still wants the rewards of leadership, but not the obligations. At the same time, provocative statements about claiming foreign territories are causing unease among US allies. Once seen as a stabilizing force, the US is now viewed with uncertainty, pushing nations to reconsider their alignment. This uncertainty is already producing real-world consequences. Canada and several European countries are now more hesitant to trade with or rely on the United States. The trust that once sustained these relationships is quickly eroding. In Switzerland and Canada, for instance, there have been political debate over whether the country should proceed with a major purchase of US-made fighter jets. The concern lies not in the product, but in the risk of becoming reliant on a nation that may no longer be a dependable partner. This hesitation could have far-reaching implications. The U.S. defense industry relies heavily on global customers to help offset the enormous costs of developing advanced weapons systems. Without those partnerships, American innovation may slow. Losing trust also means losing influence. While U.S. allies face higher costs and strategic vulnerabilities, its rivals may seize the opportunity to strengthen their own positions. The irony is striking. Much of this fallout began because of domestic resistance to continued aid to Ukraine, aid that, in financial terms, is smaller than the annual revenue the U.S. earns from arms sales to other countries. By refusing to maintain a modest commitment, the U.S. risks unraveling a profitable and strategically critical part of its global influence. It's a classic case of sacrificing long-term gain for short-term savings. To the public, these moves are often justified in the name of defending national interests or avoiding conflict. But past experience tells a more complex story. The Cold War remained cold not because America pulled back, but because it stood firm alongside its allies. The creation of NATO, and America's leadership within it, played a central role in preventing large-scale conflict. The strength of the alliance discouraged potential aggressors from escalating. Now, however, the U.S. seems ambivalent about NATO's future. This uncertainty risks weakening one of the most effective peacekeeping institutions in modern history. Meanwhile, renewed interest in acquiring Greenland is baffling to many. The U.S. already benefits from Greenland's strategic value through international cooperation, without needing to assert ownership. Statements about taking Greenland or other territories signal a pivot from cooperative global leadership to unilateral ambition. That kind of shift is unsettling to allies and partners. Once, the U.S. served as a protector of global stability. Now, it appears to be asking for all the advantages of empire without offering the security and leadership that once earned it global trust. But influence comes at a price. If the United States continues avoiding its responsibilities, it should not expect to maintain the benefits that came with them. Other nations will step away. Still, all is not lost. There have been moments, like when Donald Trump retracted certain tariffs, where reality forced a course correction. Pressure from within the country made a difference. To reverse this trajectory, influential voices within the conservative movement must speak up. The values of strong foreign alliances and responsible global leadership were once central to the Republican Party. Leaders like Ronald Reagan believed in those values. Today, many who share those principles hesitate to speak out, fearing backlash or political labels. But opposing reckless foreign policy doesn't make someone a liberal or a neocon. It makes them historically aware and committed to protecting the long-term interests of their country. Those trying to redefine the conservative movement for their own aims are not preserving tradition, they are distorting it. True leadership lies in knowing when to stand firm. Even for those who disagree with portions of this analysis, the broader message remains relevant. If the U.S. values its leadership role, it must act to preserve it. This means supporting allies, honoring commitments, and avoiding rhetoric that alienates partners. It means investing in relationships that took decades to build. There is still time to turn back and restore what has been lost, but that window may not remain open for long. Thanks for watching. If you found value in this content, feel free to like, share, and subscribe. Your support truly means a lot.